What is up, everybody? Welcome into Shout of Buffalo Football Podcast right here in EverBank Stadium, where the Buffalo Bills didn't look like it was all going their way earlier on in this game. But at the end of the day, we were sitting here talking about a Buffalo Bills team that captured their first road victory under Sean McDermott in the Josh Allen era. They are on a round after capturing a 27-24 win over the Jacksonville Jaguars today. And like, you look at the final stats, Ryan, and it wasn't a picture perfect game, but that's what the playoffs are all about. I think one of the things we were talking about going into this game was how much was playoff experience going to mean for the Buffalo Bills going on the road against a Jags team that had won 8 in a row, that had looked like maybe the best team in the league. I mean, we saw there are going to be some old takes exposed over the course of this week. I mean, how good this Jacksonville Jaguars team was supposed to look today. And at times they did, at other times they didn't. Trevor Lawrence up and down through an interception at the end of the game that gave Buffalo the win. How you feeling?
You know, you have to feel pretty good if you're a Bills fan after that one. And Matt, yeah, what were you doing in 1992? Because I was 7 years old at that point, had my birthday yet, and that's the last time the Bills have won on the road in a playoff game. So to come out here, win on the road at a very tough environment, by the way, Jacksonville fans should be very proud of the way they turned out today. It was very loud here, towels waving. They showed up and represented this fan base well. And Jacksonville's defense, Matt, it's legit. They look great in this game at stopping the run. They made things very difficult for the Bills for much of the game, but at the end, it was the experience, Josh Allen, and then 2 veterans that maybe had been written off that really stepped up for this team.
All right, so the place we have to start, this was another signature playoff Josh Allen performance. There's a ton of stats that we're going to get into here in a few minutes, but I almost feel like we have to start with Tredavious White because, of course, it's the last play of the game on defense that people are going to be talking about, and rightfully so. A pass breakup, one of 3 in the game that ends up leading to a tip pass and an interception for Cole Bishop. It felt like Tredavious White was just competing his butt off all afternoon. And going into the game, one of the big storylines was, what are the Bills going to do without Maxwell Hairston? And I thought Tredavious White came out and really steadied the ship. You look at the final numbers, 359 yards, total offense, 205 passing yards for a passing offense that was, very much so supposed to be a unit that Bills fans were a little bit afraid of going into this game. But Tredavious White, an absolutely monster play, monster performance. I know he gave up the touchdown to Brian Thomas early in the game, gave up a couple catches at different points, but a huge performance.
Yeah, the touchdown they let up was a ball that was put in the perfect spot by Trevor Lawrence, too, away from White, away from Thomas Jr.'s body that Thomas Jr. could pluck out of the air. But White was outstanding in this game. I think he may have had a pick 6 in the game had it not been for a Jacksonville player getting his hand on one of the balls near the sidelines. White read the play, was breaking on it, and was right there, but it hit Jacksonville's the receiver's hands and kind of went out of bounds. He had another one where he broke on it and just got there. That would have been more difficult crossing it, going across the middle. But it's these veterans that have the film study, the preparation, that watched all this tape and kind of had an idea of what was to come. And for White, he was brilliant today. He was reading Trevor Lawrence, knowing exactly what to expect, breaking in the ball, looking like the Trey White that was an all-pro / Pro Bowl cornerback here early in his career.
Travis Etienne had a big game today, had a couple of explosive plays. He ends up finishes as the wide receiver number 2 for the Jags in this game. Parker Washington was the one. We talked a little bit about him during the week. He ends up going 7 for 107 yards and a touchdown. Brian Thomas, only 2 catches for 21 yards. The big storyline today to me is Jacoby Myers, the guy that, we were talking so much about going into the game. He finishes with 4 targets and only 1 catch. And there were a bunch of plays where Tredavious White was in coverage against him. And, I wanted to get some perspective from Trey after the game because this was such a huge performance in a big spot for a guy that obviously is a fan favorite. I think is going to one day be maybe a Wall of Famer type of player in this Buffalo Bills organization. I wanted to get some perspective of what this meant to him, and he just didn't want any part of it. He wanted to talk about this is another win. He's focused on doing his 111th. He didn't want to get into going down memory lane and what this means considering where he was this time last year on a Baltimore Ravens team where he could barely get on the field against his former team in the Bills. He comes to Buffalo, has this unbelievable story arc, and we voted this week on the Ken Hall Stand-Up Guy Award, and he was my number 1 vote And because if you go back to his first tenure here, just a little bit of a, insight into what it was like to cover him in 2022 and 2023. The injuries really, I think, messed with his psyche a lot, and the confidence level, and just having to stand in front of the media and talk about what it's been like to play the game of football and not be Tredavious White, right? Like, because that's what those injuries will do to you. And Sean McDermott came out and said today, it's like, when he got here, he still wasn't Tredavious White. And I think that's a big reason why Sean wanted to temper expectations. But where would they be without Tredavious White right now with Maxwell Hairston out of the lineup today?
Yeah, they'd probably be home if it wasn't for Trey White. And you have to feel good for White. And White might not want to talk about it, but you had Cole Bishop at the podium post-game talking about how White continues to silence all of his doubters with the season that he's had, with the game changing play at the end, getting his hand on the ball that Bishop intercepted. So you feel good for players like that. I know not a lot came out of Hard Knocks this year with the Bills, but those hill sprints with White trying to really get back into form, he was an easy guy to root for, even if you weren't a Bills fan watching that series. And to see him come all the way back, it's one of those feel-good moments in this league.
I want to talk about Josh Allen here in a minute, but I will say, not to be like a Debbie Downer after a game like this, but I do wonder how sustainable this is. Sustainable it is from the perspective of, you have Josh Allen who's beat up. I don't know if you're getting the level of play out of this offensive line that you're used to. There were a couple plays in this game. I think when we go back and watch the game back in the fourth quarter, I thought that they really stepped up across the offensive line. But, Josh Allen is getting hit. Josh Allen, and part of that is on Joe Brady, I think, like some of the play calls and some of the situations they're putting him in. I think Josh Allen at times has to be saved from himself a little bit. And it's tough on the road. I don't know if they win this game if he doesn't put on the cape and go into, that toughness mentality in his mind, even knowing that he's got this foot injury and he puts himself in a spot like that. Defensively, though, we could talk about the big plays that they made, and they did. But late in this game, 2 touchdowns given up on the 2 drives before the last one, where they obviously were going into pass mode and the Bills could kind of play back a little bit. How concerned are you about like how the Bills are going to have to win? Or is it more about, listen, you win and advance and survive, and with the teams that are left in this pool, you can get a performance like this out of Josh Allen, and that's what gives you confidence if you're a Bills fan.
Yeah, it's win in advance for me, man. I'll give a little bit of pushback on the offensive line part. I think they allowed Allen to get hit 3 times, allowed 1 sack in this game. Now, if we want to talk about them from a run blocking perspective, absolutely. They did not do a great job today, but Jacksonville's run defense was the best in the league for a reason. They lived up to those numbers, limiting James Cook and what they could do. But we also talked in the press box about how frustrating is it that when you get down to the doorstep and on the door, right up to the goal line, you try to hand it off to anyone else, and they just can't seem to punch it in. They're relying on Allen, and Allen takes a shot early, and he has to get in the concussion protocol. He scores a touchdown on a run play near the goal line, and he has like his leg twisted oddly, and he's limping. You're playing with fire because this is the guy that you need if you want to win the Super Bowl. But at the end of the day, it's win in advance. I think the offense and Joe Brady, for as much criticism as he receives, drew up 2, solid drives late in the game to score touchdowns after Jacksonville scored. He did a nice job today late in this game. Allen was masterful as the Bills were trailing in this game, and the defense in the first half really stepped up. And, going into the fourth quarter, I think Jacksonville had 10 total points. You can't ask for much more than that out of your defense. So all around great effort by this team.
The offensive line take, I'm glad you pushed back on it, because I want to clarify that. I just felt like there were times and big moments, especially in the first half, where the passing game, it just didn't feel like they can kind of get any like consistency. Now, part of that was the penalties, which played into it. But then, I go back to that 1 sack where Allen takes the sack. I think it was for like 10 or 12 yards, and it sets up like a 2nd and 18. It felt like in the moments where they needed to really push the ball down the field, there wasn't enough protection to allow guys to get open. And now we might go back and watch the all 22 film, and maybe it looks like guys weren't getting open. We'll get into that over the course of the week. But to your point, in the fourth quarter, they did a good enough job protecting to allow big time plays to happen. I mean, that if that Brandon Cooks downfield pass doesn't happen late in the fourth quarter, who knows if they're able to sustain that drive and get all the way down there and score it. So that's a huge development at that point in the game. And it was a bunch of playmaking in this game. I mean, You think about that Cooks play. You think about the Dalton Kincaid drive where he ends up getting a catch. Dawson Knox with a 24-yarder, and then Kincaid with the touchdown. And then Keon Coleman even had a really monster 34-yard reception. It's not just a catch to get open, but then it is driving through a would-be tackler, creating extra space, getting down into the red zone. Josh Allen ends up punching it in a couple plays later. They found ways to make things happen against a defense that came in. They were advertised as this top 5 unit on against the run and the pass, and they look like that against the Bills offense.
Right, and that's what makes this win so impressive, Matt, because you could argue that the winner of this game could potentially make it to the Super Bowl out of the AFC. And to be able to beat Jacksonville, there's no doubt in my mind that they could go to Denver and be able to put up points against that defense as good as they are. And, we don't know the outcomes of the other games yet with the Chargers and the Patriots later tonight and then the Monday night game. But if you're a Bills fan, you got to be really confident after this matchup, seeing exactly what they did, getting Keon Coleman to step up in a big moment. Brandon Cooks continuing to display that he still has gas left in the tank and get downfield. And, man, what about Khalil Shakir? 12 targets, 12 catches, 82 yards. And I know a lot of it's the bubble screen stuff, but there were a few plays where it was 3rd and medium, 3rd and long, and a spin move here, making a guy miss. He turned nothing into something time and time again today and showed why he's such a valuable asset to this offense.
That 3rd and 8 where you were referencing the spin move was one of the most improbable plays of this game, where if you go back and watch that, he probably should have gotten tackled 3 or 4 yards short of the first down. He puts that spin move on and ends up getting just enough for the first down at a critical moment to keep this thing going. And that was the other thing about this. It's like, it felt like there were a drive or two in this game where it felt like, okay, the Jacksonville Jaguars offense is either waking up or really starting to assert itself. And that was my biggest concern as the game was going along, was like, are you going to be able to get enough stops and score enough points? Because it almost felt like, I think I saw a lot on Jacksonville Twitter about how unhappy their fan base was and the national questioning of how much they weren't leaning into their run game, because it felt like when they were running the ball, they were having some big explosive plays.
Absolutely. I think ETN averaged like 6.2 yards per carry.
And Tootin on that one drive was an absolute beast.
3 straight runs in a row where he ripped off big chunk plays. I think sometimes these offensive masterminds get too cute. You look at Liam Cohen, and I think Cohen's a great young head coach. He's going to do a great job in this league. But he went away with the thing that they were getting big chunk plays. They were just going to the outside off the edges and having a lot of success. How many times over the years did Mike McDaniel go away from the run in games against the Bills where they were moving it because he wanted to throw the ball? So sometimes I think even head coaches get into their own heads a little bit, and Jacksonville went away from what was working tonight, and it may have cost them in the end.
If you don't want it to cost you in the end, next weekend when the Bills are playing the divisional round, you're hosting bunch of friends and family for a party, head over to Tops Friendly Markets, because right now they got ready to serve fan favorites. This playoff season, let Tops do the cooking and you'll be the real MVP. Visit takeoutmeals.topsmarkets.com. Elevate your food game with Tops' great selection of custom cakes, desserts, pizzas, sandwiches, fresh fruit, cheese trays, fried chicken, and so much more. Save time and easily shop with the convenience of no-fee pickup on all your game day deals. There are no service fees. Score great deals in time for kickoff or any occasion at takeoutmeals.topsmarkets.com. All right, defensive line, because before we get to the defensive line, I want to get there, but I also want to talk about, this felt like a Sean McDermott legacy game.
Yeah.
In a way, it's a road win first and foremost. There were a couple of critical game management situations that came up that I was impressed with him. Number one, challenging the Trevor Lawrence first down call. When it appeared that he was down short, they called it a first down. They challenged it. It got reversed, got the Bills the ball back. That was a huge play. If they go and score a touchdown there and go up 14-3 early in this game with how hard the sledding was, that's a serious concern. Then late in the game, I thought that the way that they executed, it's a tough call there. On one hand, you have the argument that you knee it, right? And you try to bleed the clock because you don't want to give Jacksonville a lot of time left on the clock. But the other part of it is you can get real cute down there and you could try to extend the game a little bit and then maybe not score. And
Right.
Could you imagine? I mean, you want to talk about a fireable offense. If you're that close to the goal line and you don't get in, sometimes you just got to make sure that you score. And I think you do have to trust your defense. Listen, it was 2 straight plays where they weren't getting stops, and we might have just lost our internet here. I'm going to have to check it out. But 2 straight plays or 2 straight drives where they end up going down and scoring touchdowns. It takes a lot of stones to have trust in your defense still to be able to make a stop, and the Bills got the job done there.
Yeah, it certainly takes a lot of stones in that situation and what we saw. But at the same time, Matt, it's also common sense. And, a lot of Bills fans, I'm going to push back on exactly what I saw on social media after the game. Fans that can't be happy despite the Bills winning this game and saying, oh, they should have taken a knee. They should have bled the clock. Listen, you don't know what's going to happen. And let's just say Josh Allen, Matt, takes a knee and you burn the first down play there. You're backed up a little bit. Then all of a sudden you're not guaranteed to score. What if there's a holding? What if there's a false start? All of a sudden you're at the 7 or even further back. You take the points. Yes, Jacksonville let them score after, I think, letting them try to score on the previous play where he kind of pushed his way in on the QB sneak after getting moving the chains on what was 4th and inches there. But you have to take the points in that moment. Make them march down the field and score a touchdown to win it, or at least march to field goal range to try to tie the game, But you always take the points in a winner-go-home game. No criticism there. I loved the play calling early in this game, too. The way this defense came out, 3 and out, punt, interception. I know they gave up a touchdown on the third drive, turnover on downs, punt, missed field goal. The defense showed up and showed out, and that's been the Achilles heel of this team in the playoffs.
We got David Trelizio, one of our insiders, in the chat with a super chat, and he says, well, he'll let us pick the question. We'll take both questions. First of all, the refs in this game, really? This was about as unprofessional a performance as I've seen. And here's another thing I got to try to figure out. Maybe it's something I could broach with Sean McDermott in the Monday press conference tomorrow. The ambiguity around the replay assistant is the most weird development in this year's NFL season. You get a punt. By the way, that's another Sean McDermott play. I like the decision to punt and back them up late in the half. And I know they end up going and getting in field goal position, but they should have never even been allowed to attempt that field goal because it was obviously 0-0 on the clock before the snap ever happened. Again, another referee blunder. But you get a punt down to the 1 yard line. Replay assistant comes in and magically moves the ball up to the 3 yard line. There's no explanation for it. If I'm a fan of a team watching this game, or even a casual observer, somebody that's watching the NFL around the league, I just don't think that's a great product. I thought the referee, the officiating in this game, there were a couple plays where I thought that there were holding penalties on the Jags that were completely not called. And there were probably some penalties that were missed on the Bills as well. It just wasn't a very good officiated game.
This is a multi-billion-dollar league. And how long did that discussion take before halftime, before saying there was 1 second left on the clock? Minutes. Right. You have replay assists. You have people in New York. You have officials on the stands, and they couldn't figure this thing out. And, as the saying goes, ball don't lie. Cam Little should not have had an attempt to kick that field goal. They can say the Bills were offsides, but the right tackle on Jacksonville was not lined up properly. That could have been a difference-making play. The whole what is it called? The virtual measurement. Right. What a stupid concept. It's based on where they mark the ball. So how is that even helping? You'd think a virtual measurement would be based on looking at the videos and seeing where a player was down and then using that. Kind of like what they do in tennis. And I don't know what they have in the tennis balls, but what's in, what's out. And they can go to a video and it clearly shows it. They're still using what could be human error in terms of where they put the ball and things like that. So that makes no sense. To have so much money coming into this league year in, year out, and them having these officials that there's always at least one game, it feels like, where there's a difference-making call or non-call, it's unacceptable.
The other question here, where would the Bills rather go? Houston, Pittsburgh, or Denver? And I think this is a really good question, and I've been saying it all week. I think the Chargers are very much a live underdog on the road against New England in Drake May's first playoff game. And, we saw what happened. The Bills were able to do against them a couple of weeks ago in their house. I think John Harbaugh on the road coming out with a plan to maybe limit some of what they're able to do on offense. This is the time of year where it gets really tough. And then I think on the other side, I know the offensive line is an issue, but Justin Herbert, this is a guy that's played in playoff games, that has thrown for almost 50 touchdowns in a season. I think that they're going to be very live. But in terms of the questions, where would the Bills rather go in the next week? I got to go with Pittsburgh.
Yeah, absolutely, Pittsburgh. And, no knock on the Steelers. I think they are capable of defeating the Houston Texans on Monday night. But of those 3 games, you have a quarterback that's not very mobile. You have a team that the Bills have already beaten and shown that they can beat. It's not a far distance away. The weather is stuff that the Bills won't be fazed by. So there's a lot there. In terms of Denver, sometimes these teams that get a bye are a little rusty, so maybe that wouldn't be the worst scenario. But of the 3, absolutely, I would go with the Pittsburgh Steelers.
I want to give a little shout out real quick. I just got a text message that my little niece Ava is watching the live show. She's so pumped up about a Bills win. She's watching the live show.
I love it.
Out in Virginia. So shout out to her.
So
is
very
he?
Cool. Yeah, he texted me.
Oh, and
he said, send me a message. He's just finally got a phone, a real legitimate phone. Texted me and said, let me know when you're going live. So I let him know he's watching and complaining a little bit about ads popping up. But hey, it is what it is there, Owen. So see you tomorrow. You got to get through the adversity, Owen, when you're watching the post-game episode of the podcast. All right, defensive line. If we were doing an encouraged and worried part of this game, and you put up the story over on New York Upstate and Syracuse.com, the defensive line performance and the lack of impact from Joey Bosa in this game against, Walker Little and company on this offensive line has me a little bit concerned. I thought Greg Rousseau had one of the plays of the game, sacking Trevor Lawrence, which ultimately led to the stop on 4th down. That was a huge sequence in the game. But overall, this is a defensive line that I got a text message as soon as the game ended, and it's like, what's the chances of Ed Oliver next week? I still think it's probably a long shot for next week, and probably more likely that we could start to talk about getting him back into the mix sometime in the AFC Championship week if the Bills can advance. But yeah, I think just more production there. And, we got to talk about Larry Ogunjobi being a healthy scratch in this game. Fedarian Mathis getting a jersey, Andre Jones off of the practice squad. And there you have Larry Ogunjobi, who the Bills are paying $8 million to, watching on the sidelines. Yeah, it's frustrating because if you're a Bills fan, you're saying this is the same old Bills defensive line, not making impact plays consistently. And I totally get that because they paid Greg Rousseau good money to be a difference maker. They paid Bosa for this time of the year, January, get out there, make some plays. Now, I will say Walker Little had a false start. He had a few issues, and maybe that was because of Bosa and Rousseau at times. But the impact plays just weren't there consistently enough. Deion Walker on the middle had a nice batted pass in this game. He continues to shine as a rookie. But off the edge, there's so much to be desired. And that's one area where I can't really fault Brandon Beane. As much criticism as he gets, he's tried to draft guys. He's tried to bring free agents in. Things, just whatever reason, are not clicking come January for these players. And this was a game where, yeah, Trevor Lawrence has a little bit of mobility to his game, but you didn't get enough from your edge rushers, and you're going to need them to step up as soon as next weekend. The 2 sacks in this game, Rousseau for the Bills, Joshua Hines Allen. And, you look at the quarterback hits and you're right. It's 3 for the Jags. And maybe on the rewatch, it won't seem it just felt so hard for the Bills offense. Right. And I think that also makes the 4th quarter Josh Allen performance come into focus is even more impressive. I saw it shared on social media when the Bills were trailing in this game. Josh Allen went, 195 passing yards, 3 touchdowns, 2 rushing in the and I think he went 14 of 16, had 133 quarterback rating. Dalton Kincaid, who was pretty invisible in the first half, stepped up big on that second to last touchdown drive. He had the big catch to set things up, and then Dawson Knox, and then the touchdown catch. Josh Allen in the 4th quarter on what was probably one leg. I mean, and who knows? I mean, it's the right foot. And I'm pretty sure it was the left leg that got tangled on the 1 touchdown run. He is absolutely banged up. And what he was able to do against this defense in particular, I mean, you really can't say enough about the performance of Josh Allen in this game. The great ones find a way. And how many times have we seen Allen take hits where you're saying, how is he going to get up from that? And he just finds a way. He goes into the blue medical tent, pops out about 30 seconds to a minute later, and acts like he's fine. Up until this year, it was the same thing with Patrick Mahomes, the ankle injuries, and is he going to play? And then he comes out the next week and it's no issue. Somehow these guys got through it. They tough it out. Allen did everything possible. All the QB sneaks that he had to run on one good leg, essentially, and being able to move the chains over and over again. It's a testament to his toughness, his grit, and how much he means to this team. All right, you know what time it is. I saw a great comment in there. Does Amtrak go to Pittsburgh? And maybe we will have to see if we can't get on the old train to get out to Pittsburgh if the Bills end up going there for the divisional round.
but Amtrak Hype Train Player of the Game Award. Head over to Amtrak.com right now. Make sure you get yourself set up for any travel trips coming up. Free baggage, or free Wi-Fi, no baggage fees. Kids ride 50% off. Amtrak.com is the way to go. I'm going to go with Matt Prater because
Ooh, I love it.
Coming out of this game, the only kicker in this game to have missed a field goal was the superhero Cam Little, who everybody was talking about going into the game. And we got a Hype Train Player of the Week award. I think we got to come up with an award for like what is it, Old Takes Exposed?
Yeah.
We got to come up with something along those lines with the Amtrak, and I'd give that to TJ Hushmanzada, who is going to get absolutely panned on social media this week, who said the Jacksonville Jaguars were going to absolutely dominate this game.
And that's a great pick, Matt, because I believe Matt Prater was probably alive when trains were first invented based on his age. So, great, great choice with Matt Prater. I'm going to go with the defensive player that we haven't talked about yet that had a huge impact on this game, Shaq Thompson.
Oh.
Shaq Thompson comes to Buffalo this offseason after 2 years in Carolina, where he played a total of 6 games. Another one of those players that's probably been written off, talked about how the best days are behind him, and he's been meant so much to this team. And in this game, he meant so much to the Bills. Early in the game, an interception. Sean McDermott talked about it post-game, where some of the film that they watched and some of the things that they practiced, it was almost identical to what he had seen in those reps, and he read the play. He jumped on the ball, intercepted a huge play early in the game, and then that 4th and 2 Lawrence scramble, Thompson reads the play, gets in, makes the tackle, stops him short. And I know that he didn't pop the ball out, but he also swung his arm in on that play, and the ball came loose for a second. So it's just the wherewithal to, 1, make that play, but 2, try to punch it out and almost succeed in doing so. He meant so much early on in this game because, like you said, if they go up 14-3 there, the Bills may not have been able to come back. He helps them after they turn the ball over on Ray Davis's fumble on that kickoff to create a turnover on downs, keep the Bills in this game. So he's my Amtrak Player of the Week.
The other piece of this, too, for me is like Sean McDermott talks about like the toughness, and you got to be a tough team to go on the road and win in the playoffs. There's no player on this defense to me that embodies that mentality more than Shaq Thompson. And you could feel the impact that he's had on all of his teammates when it comes to, being in these spots and making big time plays. And, that's another side conversation worth having, that, you think about some of the moves that Brandon Beane made this offseason. And listen, he deserves criticism around the wide receiver room. I mean, sure. Gabe Davis gets injured in this game. It doesn't look like he's probably going to be available for the rest of the playoffs. I mean, he was on crutches. I can't imagine that's going to be a good development. It was a really kind of borderline dirty hit, I thought, with the way that he went down. It was a bang play over the middle. He seemed a little bit upset about it after the game. He goes out. Tyrell Shavers goes out in this game. You have Keon Coleman playing a pretty significant role, couple weeks removed from being a healthy scratch. And, we've talked about what Brandon Cooks has meant, and Khalil Shakir had this huge game. I get giving Brandon Beane criticism for this wide receiver room and some of the other, maybe deficiencies on this team. But if you look at some of the decisions he made of guys to bring in, those under the radar guys that I feel like he's been so good at finding over the years, Shaq Thompson, Tredavius White, bringing him in. I know Jordan Poyer goes out in this game, but how well has he been playing? And then when he did go out, Jordan Hancock looked like he was in deep water and he was struggling to swim. And so there's a lot of those kinds of moves that I feel like have paid real dividends for the Bills. And, Deion Walker, you mentioned him, a rookie defensive lineman. He's been really important. So I feel like this result of this game probably saves jobs, right?
Right.
Like,
absolutely.
And not so much saves jobs, because I don't think either of us thought that Brandon Beane or Sean McDermott were in danger of getting fired, but it saves jobs in terms of the conversations not really probably starting, because at this point, with what the Bills are dealing with from an injury perspective, going and getting that first road win, I feel like knowing the situation with ownership, I now definitely can't see a scenario where Brandon or Sean are fired.
No, and you mentioned it's a mixed bag in terms of the players that he's brought in, but there's so many that have stepped up in a big time way. And one player that I could see stepping up in a big time way as of next week could be Darnell Savage, a player that they claimed off of waivers a few weeks ago. And I know he was a healthy scratch today, but if Poyer can't go, there's a player with a ton of on-field experience. He's been in the system now for a few weeks. Hardman could come up at wide receiver, add a speed element with all the injuries that they're dealing with there. So they have guys waiting in the wings. And I know these are not superstar players, but they're guys that the Bills kind of said in season, we need players to be able to step up with any kind, in case of any kind of injury. You talked about White. We've talked about Walker. Look at Cole Bishop and his ascension in year 2. You drafted him fairly early last year, and he's really grown and matured in that role. So with the bad, there's also plenty of good.
All right. I think that'll do it here from EverBank Stadium. The Bills win 27-24. All eyes turn to New England hosting the Chargers tonight. We'll be live with a podcast tomorrow. At some point, we travel back to Buffalo, and he's going to have to get back to Olean. We'll have you covered from the stadium. I'm hoping to head right over there from the airport, and then we'll have another podcast for you too. I'd like to watch this game back and give you a little bit more analysis. It was another crazy right in the fourth quarter, right? Like, coming down, it's Bill score, Jag score, or Jag score, Bill score, Jag score, Bill score. It's like, and then the final possession. So what a wild ride, a heck of a playoff game to cover. I'll give you the final thought.
Yeah, final thought. Wait and see who they play next week. But if the way the Bills are playing, you can't count them out on a deep run.
All right, everybody. Have a great rest of your weekend. Enjoy the rest of the games.